The things that he mentioned in that interview that were important to him, all of the pillars.
Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security released figures revealing almost 2,000 children were forced into separation from their parents during a period of only 6 weeks between April and May of this year. John?
Jillian Turner in Washington, thank you. For more on this, we turn again to Saagar Enjeti, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. So there are a couple of bills on Capitol Hill right now. The so-called compromise bill has these elements: a path to citizenship for the Dreamers, the people who are adults now brought to this country as children, $25 billion to build the president's long-desired border wall. It would also bring an end to the diversity visa lottery system and put limits on so-called chain migration or family migration. Does that have a chance of passing, Saagar?
Well, you know, that is a very open question right now. As I understand it, they are still a couple of votes short, but the House is certainly whipping this. And I know that the House Majority leadership has requested an explicit presidential tweet in favor of this bill in order to give some of the more hardline members of Congress some cover because they would be supporting a pathway to citizenship for the Dreamers. That really has been a yardstick for measurement of whether people are viewed as a hardliner or not on the issue. But the president and his team believe that by offering a pathway to citizenship for those Dreamers, and by doing so, they in exchange are willing to do that for the border security funding, for the end to the diversity visa lottery system, and especially for the curtailments in legal immigration over the several period of years. As I understand it, the White House officials are emphasizing that this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment in order to actually change the U.S. both legal and illegal immigration system, which would significantly reduce the number of low-skilled immigrants to this country over the next 10 to 15 years.
What are the chances that this compromise measure might actually get some Democrat votes?
Almost certainly not. And the reason for that is because it does include curtailments of long-term legal migration. And that's something that many Democratic lawmakers have said is an absolute no-go for them. They view that as an encroachment on existing immigration law, which they're very comfortable with. And in many cases, they would like to expand the immigration pool and grant a pathway to citizenship for the nearly 11 to 20 million illegal immigrants that are in this country. So if it does have a chance of passage, it would be because the president, and through an explicit whipping effort, is able to bring together the hardline immigration people within his caucus, as well as people who support a pathway to citizenship for those Dreamers, and then send that bill on the way to the Senate.
Let's talk a little bit about this separation controversy that's going on right now. According to figures from the Associated Press, nearly 2,000 children were separated from their families at the Mexico border in the last couple of months. The Deputy Commissioner for Customs and Border Protection says there's a reason for that. Here's what he had to say.
So if someone crosses the border illegally, then they should be referred for prosecution. We're attempting to do that. Now, a third of the population that we're arresting comes as part of a family or a child alone. The child obviously cannot be prosecuted, but when the family member brings them through this arduous journey, putting them in danger, crossing the border illegally, we refer that parent for prosecution. The children are then taken to these HHS shelters, and they're both given instructions to how to contact each other once the court adjudication takes place. Most of these kids that will go to the shelter will be placed with a family member in the United States as quickly as HHS can do that.
The president's political opponents are howling about these separations, Saagar, as you well know, but what is Customs and Border Patrol supposed to do?
That's exactly the question that the White House is asking. And they would point to this and say, if we do not criminally prosecute illegal immigrants who cross our border, the alternative is that we release them into the interior of the country, through which they would wait for a period of probably several years to appear before a judge to adjudicate their asylum claim. And the reason that we see such a massive spike in the number of asylum claims from people from non-contiguous countries like those from Central America, which comprise much of the people illegally arriving at the border is because they know that that is a way in order to circumvent U.S. law and avoid deportation. Because we have such generous immigration law and asylum laws, we have to accept these people and hear them out in a court of law. So what the Trump administration is doing is they're cracking down on the criteria for the type of people that they're going to give asylum to, and they're criminally prosecuting every adult who crosses the U.S.-Mexico border as a deterrent policy. Now, the president has blamed Democrats, and specifically a Democratic law, for doing this, but it's actually because of a Supreme Court settlement from a court settlement from the late 1990s called the Flores settlement, and that is actually what requires a certain set of laws to house children in separate, less stringent facilities and take them away from their parents in the event that they're criminally prosecuted.
We were talking about the Democrat opposition to this so-called compromise bill. Politics is horse trading. Are Democrats not willing to trade citizenship or a path to citizenship for dreamers in exchange for these reduced immigration numbers?
They have held the line on this consistently, and I believe that they have an ally in much of the mainstream press, because many of them will parrot, many of these stories that are going down at the border. And it is absolutely tragic to have 2,000 children separated from their parents. But consistently we have seen, as of yet, no real effort by Democratic lawmakers to meet the president even halfway in terms of border security, and especially in terms of long-term cuts to legal immigration. And so until that holds, this is unlikely to go anywhere. And the president and the White House and the Trump administration are looking at this and saying that we have record number of people who are illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. In order to stop perverse incentives of essentially letting people go free once they arrive here, they're tracking down and they're getting tough by criminally prosecuting them.
Yeah, we could see a vote in Congress as early as the upcoming week. Saagar Enjeti from the Daily Caller, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
There's new reaction.